What's up, Gator Nation? Zach Abaverdi and Nick Del Toro here, and it is South Carolina week for the Florida Gators. They are back on the road in SEC play after getting a happy homecoming against Vanderbilt, 38-14 win. They did a lot of good things that they felt good about in the swamp. Obviously, some things that they still addressed in practice this week. And hearing from Billy and the players on Wednesday night, they said it was the best practice that they've had since Tennessee week. So we'll see what that yields on Saturday, but they're trying to get a road win, Nick.
Just one of those under Billy Napier, and
Yep.
if I recall, that was a 5-win Texas A&M team who, on top of injuries, also had the flu that week. We're missing like 30 guys, so not one to really hang your hat on. I've been going back and forth with my pick. You'll have to see that on Friday, but I don't know what I'm going to do in terms of a pick. Maybe our guest, Wes Mitchell, will help sway me one way or the other.
No doubt. We'll be joined by Wes Mitchell from Gamecocks Central to get some perspective on South Carolina and where they're at this season. That will be a 3:30 kick on Saturday. Nick and I will be there live from Williams-Brice Stadium to see what the Gators can do back on the road again. Before we get into that matchup and talk to Wes, give you our keys to the game, want to assess this Florida football team at the halfway point of the season. Nick put out his mid-season report card, so definitely encourage folks to go check out that at Gators Online. And we definitely got a lot of coverage coming this week between us being on the road. Corey and Keith are going to be on some sidelines that I think Florida fans will want to be paying attention to in the coming days. So make sure that you guys are subscribed to Gators Online and definitely take advantage of that deal that we've got. $1, you can get yourself into the door. So before we get into kind of assessing the Gators to the halfway point, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Bird Dogs. Nick always repping the hat. And you can go to birddogs.com/Gators, use the promo code Gators, and get a free Hydro Flask style water bottle with your purchase. You can get the hat that Nick's rocking. You can get the polo shirt that you guys have seen us enjoy very much. And, of course, the khakis as well. They got pants. They got shorts designed to fit slimmer through the leg to give you a truly sculpted look. Do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. So definitely encourage you guys to go out and go to birddogs.com. Use that promo code Gators to get the free Hydro Flask water bottle, as well as hats, khakis, the polos, and whatever else is your fancy. So, Nick, we are 6 games into 2023. The Gators are 4-2. They are 2-1 in SEC play. I think we've got a good pulse on this team. We're going to find out, I think, a lot about what the second half of the season is going to look like with this trip in Columbia this weekend. But obviously coming off of the Vanderbilt game and then just through the first half of this schedule, what's your take on this team and where they're at in year 2 under Billy Napier?
Yeah, I think probably tracking right where I thought they'd be, 6-7. Just kind of like the way that 4-2 has happened, though, that you don't realize that they're 4-2 and a win this week. They're 5-2 heading into the bye. And like, if I offered you that in July, you'd probably take it. And you know, and right now we're firing analysts, we're hiring offensive coordinators, we're taking scholarships away from kids. It's been a roller coaster of a season, and I think we'll learn a lot about Florida this week. You know, you can tell me that it's been a great week of practice, but if you show up and it's 23-0 at halftime, then I don't care what practice looked like or how much sleep you got. You know, to not be able to win on the road, and I think it's the way that Florida's lost on the road with shooting themselves in the foot, procedural penalties, things of that nature, and just starting slow. I mean, in both games down 3 scores early, and this is not an offense that's built to overcome things like that. But other than that, like, Graham Mertz has been better than I thought he would be. The defense is 9th in third down.
Yeah.
They were 129th last year. So, like, the defense outside of one bad tackling game has been fantastic. And I think we're seeing young players emerge. You had that tweet today that Florida has 11 guys, 11 true freshmen who have played. That's more than anybody in the country. So I think right now the team's where I thought they'd be. They're young, they're taking lumps, and they look like a young team at times.
Yeah, and I think that stat really kind of puts it into perspective. And if you go back and revisit some of the comments from Billy in the offseason at SEC Media Days, some of the stuff that he said in preseason camp, like, he let people know that this was going to be a young team. And I think that we've seen some of those growing pains this year, but we've also seen some really talented young players that are only going to get better as their careers move forward. And again, one of those 11 true freshmen that have played in every game, which leads the FBS. That doesn't include Eugene Wilson. That doesn't include Andy Jean and some other freshmen who kind of flashed as well. But there's also, the transfers to take into account as well. Nick did the, kind of the transfer report earlier this month of what those guys have kind of impacted the team. And I think that that's certainly shown up as well. Obviously, Graham Mertz kind of leads the pack there in terms of what he's been able to do. Another really accurate game that he had against Vanderbilt, and then Montreal Johnson, another transfer that they added from the previous class, kind of had his bounce back game. Really hadn't performed or produced to the level that he did as a sophomore, his first year with the Gators, and he kind of found his groove against Vanderbilt. And I think that might bode well for the second half of the season, especially now that you have Trevor Etienne back. Every time that the Gators have had a game where both of those guys are going off, both of them are averaging several yards per pop, getting close to the 100-yard range. Those have been some of Florida's best games under Billy. And I think to get both of them going, not just one, but both of them, is kind of key to the success of this team and this offense. And of course, so is the offensive line, and it's been just a moving door of injuries and guys being out at different points. But I think that when you look at it, I mean, the Vanderbilt game was probably one of their best games from a pass protection standpoint. The pressures that Graham faced in that game were kind of either on the running backs or on him holding the ball too long or trying to make a play scrambling. So the offensive line actually played pretty well for the most part in that Vanderbilt game. And, Damian George had to step over and move to left tackle, which we didn't expect. We got to see Cam Waits a little bit more extended action than what we saw at Kentucky. And Nick, I think they maybe figured out their, 7th, 8th, 9th lineman now. It's just about getting some now cohesiveness and chemistry with whoever that best five is going to be moving forward. And I think if they can get some games in a row, that would be key. And I know that Trevor and Montreal are counting on it. And Graham. Oh, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm having mic issues. It'll be interesting for me. One, I think it's incredible that Cam Waits is even back at this point. I mean, Achilles, best case, I think he's 9.5, 10 months removed from surgery. Achilles' best case is 6. It's typically 12 or longer months. And I would probably lean towards longer when you're 6'8" and 350 pounds. He gives you a swing guy. He played guard at UL, came to Florida, played guard. They moved him to tackle. Then he moved back to guard last year for the Las Vegas Bowl. He can kind of play either side of the line in 4 of the 5 positions. So that's a huge depth piece, and we'll see how they continue to bring him along. But he looked really good, all considered, last game. And I think cohesion, it's tough. You're halfway through the year. Yeah. At what point can you get cohesion, or how much can you expect? But I think Jake Slaughter's a guy that's continued to impress me, and I didn't really have or didn't know what to expect from him. but I think he's been as good as a healthy Kingsley would have been. So I don't know that Florida's really missing Kingsley. I think he'll probably travel with the team, even though he won't play, just because he's that kind of leader,
Sure.
leader in the locker room. But yeah, the offensive line, I think we were getting on them a little bit, and then Billy and Graham both said, pulled a Corso, not so fast, my friend. With hey, not all of the sacks or quarterback hits have been because of the line, and Graham can do things better there too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was charged with 3, was really only sacked twice. One of them was an intentional grounding. But again, 2 of them were on running backs that had kind of allowed some hurries on 2 of the plays, and then one of them, Graham just kind of took off thinking he could make a play, and he got sacked. So Jake Slaughter will see in his second road start. He didn't play at Kentucky until the last couple snaps when Kingsley left the game. He said this week, hey, that Utah performance, I didn't feel good about. First time out on the road, I think he didn't realize all the things that went into that starting job. Now he does, and I think he's looking forward to trying to put on a better showing in Columbia. And then on the defensive side, real quick, before we bring in Wes, as Nick mentioned, the numbers, obviously they stand out. I think one of the most encouraging things is how many freshmen are playing. We mentioned the guys on the offensive side of the ball, and Trey Wilson's been a star. But Jordan Castell, TJ Searcy, Kelby Collins. There's been a lot of guys in the secondary now. Bryce Thornton is starting as well at safety. Jakeem Jackson's made a bunch of plays. There's a lot to like about the freshmen that they've brought in the level that those guys are playing at. I think they're going to still have more tests to come in the coming weeks, and I think that certainly on Saturday against Spencer Rattler, that's going to be one of them. But even Tyreek Sapp, Nick, I think that they are missing Justice Boone for sure. If he would not have gotten hurt, a guy from South Carolina, that's a player that would have improved for the sack total and have them be in a much better spot. But they are getting pressure on the quarterback. I mean, Princely's, he doesn't have crazy numbers, but you see some of the all 22 film on him. He's really been playing well at that edge spot and getting pressure on quarterbacks. And then Tyreek Sapp, man, finally got a sack or another sack, should I say, in the Vanderbilt game, and kind of wreaked havoc there, forced some fumbles and just kind of playing that edge spot, which is something that he's had to adjust to this season. So a lot to like about that side of the ball, Nick.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to like on that side of the ball. Got to be able to take the show on the road, though. And I think that's really and that's kind of why last week I said, it wasn't a must-win game against Vanderbilt, because I don't know that I learned anything about the team against Vanderbilt. Cool, good win. Vanderbilt's really bad. You beat a bad team the way you were supposed to beat them. But it won't mean anything if you go to South Carolina, and it looks like it did the last time you were there.
Yeah, oh gosh, that was an ugly game. We'll talk to Wes about that, about last year's game as well, and certainly about what we're going to see on Saturday. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to My Perfect Franchise before we bring in Wes. If you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. Andy's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. And we are now going to be joined by Wes Mitchell from Gamecocks Central to get some perspective from the other side. Wes, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. What's up, boys? How y'all doing?
Doing well,
we
man.
Agreed to call this drive. Have we agreed to call this the Spurrier Bowl?
I don't think we have agreed, but I mean, we can. I'm here for that, man. We obviously have been previewing the game all week long as well, and you can't talk about this game without ultimately bringing up Steve Spurrier, I feel like. And I saw Spurrier, I guess, wants Florida to throw the ball down the field, which I get, which is cool. But also I was like, man, that's got to be tough to just still have the shadow. If you're a Florida coach, you just are constantly going to always have the shadow of Steve Spurrier sort of right there around your program, it seems like.
Yeah, and to
Well,
be fair,
luckily, Zach, they moved them. They moved buildings. Like they have their own football building now, but you used to have to drive past the statue of Steve, and then have his office just a floor above you. So forever immortalized, and then also just a couple doors down.
So you have to drive. You had to drive by the statue, and then you could hear Spurrier talking on his flip phone above you in the office space, basically. So
just really not throwing the ball down the field.
Tough life, man.
Well, now in Spurrier's defense, my man's not going out there on a limb to give his criticism. He's got a radio show in Gainesville, and of course, you got that. Florida fans are going to call and ask the HBC what he thinks, and he's not going to bite his tongue, as you know, Wes.
Yeah, never been shy about anything, I feel like, which is, I mean, that's why we love him. And so is the Spurrier Bar and Grill sports bar still going strong? That's the thing,
man,
right?
That's become a Gainesville staple.
Okay. We actually need one of those here in Columbia as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it was Jerry's way to get all of his stuff out of the house.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the walls there.
She's playing chess.
You're right, though, Wes. He could totally open a Spurrier's in Columbia.
He's going to be honored. So y'all know, it's a little like the way it ended.
Sure.
Little weird, little mixed feelings, but it's been long enough now. They're actually honoring those 3 11-win teams for the Jacksonville State game, and Spurrier's supposed to be here. So, and that will. I think that's the first time they've done like an official, bring him back and honor that group. So I think that'll be a big step, for people here, for him. And obviously he's working there now, and we know what he did at Florida, but still for a lot of people, I mean, that's the 3 best years South Carolina's ever had. And certainly the 3 best they've had there in a row as a group. So I'll be happy to see him come back. And I think a little bit of the way it ended, that's kind of subsided a little bit, and people remember the good times he gave South Carolina fans.
It's not the same thing because of the circumstances, obviously, but it is a little bit similar in some ways with Urban Meyer and Florida fans. Like there's this, like you can't deny what he did for the school, but there were so many fans that just had a bad taste in their mouth about the way he left. Again, totally different circumstances. But over time, like I think Florida fans have come around on Urban. He's probably going to end up in the Ring of Honor, and I'm sure Spurrier will get the same at South Carolina. So
I hope so, man. We even there were some people, we talked about this on our radio show, and there were some people saying that we were crazy to even think that some Gamecock fans kind of dislike Spurrier because of the way he left. And then we had people texting our fan line who are still legitimately upset about him leaving in the middle of the season. So
show some appreciation, Gamecock Nation.
He always, to me, that's the most Steve Spurrier way to end a coaching career ever. Like he said if he couldn't do it anymore, he would walk away. He would fire himself. And that is essentially what he did. So in some ways,
just like a practice. It was like midweek practice, and he kind of just looked around. Yeah. Don't think I can do this anymore.
Well, so as the story goes, and I know we got to talk about the actual game, but as the story goes,
Florida fans aren't going to be upset about us having Spurrier stories.
Yeah, I might have talked about this 2 years ago or last year with you guys, I feel like, but he kind of mentioned it to it was like a young player practice or a young player segment of practice. And he kind of mentioned it to some of the older guys who were standing around, and they didn't know if he was like messing with it. Like, it wasn't like, let me bring the team in and have a team meeting and formally, it was literally like, I think I'm done. And they're like, wait, what? And then an hour later, it starts to kind of break. And there were people on the team that were like, wait, is this real? So it was very informal how he did it, even within the doors over there, from what I hear.
I know that brings up bad memories for South Carolina fans, but from a Florida perspective, it is just classic Spurrier.
Yes,
like,
hundred
uh,
percent.
that sounds about right. Well, Wes, let's get into obviously this South Carolina team and this year's matchup. Certainly not the start to the season that they've wanted, but they've obviously had some tough opponents. 2-3 at this point. What have been your thoughts on Shane Beamer's team this year and kind of where they're at the halfway point?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, they're 2-3. No South Carolina fans really envisioned that or wanted that. You could kind of look at the schedule coming in though, and certainly say, well, hey, that is a real possibility. The 3 losses are all to top 25 teams. Um, 2 of those were on the road. One was neutral site in a kind of a big game atmosphere to start the year against North Carolina, a team that I think is pretty good, pretty talented, especially on offense.
Yep.
And so when they face those sort of top 25-ish type teams, that's when they've gotten beat. They've kind of taken care of business against the Mississippi State team that, I thought was okay, not great. And then they beat Furman, which you would expect there at home. So the season has kind of been almost chalk for them as far as how Vegas would see it, but certainly not the way Gamecock fans would see it. And a lot of it has been, it's kind of always turns back to this conversation about the offensive line and can they give Spencer Rattler time to operate? Can they give their running backs room to run? They're not really dynamic in the running back room, but they're okay there.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't been able to consistently do that. And Rattler, I mean, guys, when Rattler has had time, like he's truly been pretty phenomenal. And then at other times, the protection is just broken down. Tennessee really got after him, and he didn't really have much of a chance at all in that game. And probably didn't play his best game either, but that's really been the story, has just been the offensive line. They had injuries there off the bat, but was kind of already a spot that was a question as well. And was probably one of those spots where you're saying going in, I don't need any injuries at this spot. And then, of course, lo and behold, that's where you get a bunch of injuries.
And how much of it, you have injuries, obviously, but South Carolina, and I guess you can't totally give the offensive line a pass here, but if they can't run the ball, and the passing offense has been good, but now you're making yourself one-dimensional, and then a team like Tennessee who can get after the quarterback says, well, you can't run the ball. We don't even have to try to stop it because you can't do it, and now we'll just pin our ears back and we'll get after Rattler. Because I look at the sack numbers and the rushing total, and I think, well, they're just telegraphing what they can do.
Yeah, it's true, man. And they, against Mississippi State, even though they could never quite pull away, it felt like they were always kind of in control of that game. And, they'd be up by 2 scores, and Mississippi State would cut it to a 1 score. Then Carolina would go up 2 scores again. It was never really out of their control. And it felt like they just said, look, we're going to be hard-headed. We're going to keep running the football. And, we may get 1 yard here. We may get 5 here. Then we may get 1 again. But we're just going to keep running the ball. And Mississippi State, with them having just that little bit of threat of the run, and Mississippi State not being quite as good up front as, like, say, a Tennessee, they were able to kind of just run the ball just enough and then throw when they needed to. Against Tennessee, they had the one long run that even kind of skews those numbers a pretty good bit. They weren't really able to consistently run the ball. And a big thing for them has just been when teams, like you said, when they know they're throwing or when they know they're running. They had a 3rd and short against Tennessee where they were stopped. The following 4th and 1, they went for it. They tried to throw, obviously, because they're not confident in their ability to run in that situation. And short throw ends up being short of the sticks. Then later on in the game, they have a 3rd and short. They're stopped. Then they have a 4th and 1. They try to go quarterback sneak and just get pushed back. So it's really, to your point, man, if teams know what they're doing, and they're kind of boxed in, they just have really struggled in those situations, especially when they face like some really good pass rushers. That just matchup does not go their way. They're playing a true freshman left tackle, talented kid. He's going to be really good, but he's kind of just learning on the job.
Interesting. Wes, wanted to get your thoughts on the Georgia game, and that was the I think first time we really saw maybe how vulnerable the Bulldogs could be. And obviously, South Carolina looked really good to start that game. What was your, were you surprised at all by that? And then what was kind of some of the fallout by the way that they just weren't able to kind of finish it?
Yeah, not totally surprised. I think, they were confident, which that doesn't always mean everything. They were confident going into the game. That was really one of the few times this year that they've had Juice Wells and Xavier Legette healthy at the same time. And then they had that for literally one drive, and Legette gets re-injured, Juice Wells gets re-injured, scoring a touchdown on that drive. And so they had them on the field. They go right down the field. They score right out the bat. It was a well-called drive, well-executed drive. They were kind of moving the ball around, short throws, intermediate throws, ran it just enough, which is a key for them, obviously. And then Juice is done again. The offense they had one drive at the end of the half where they hit a couple explosive plays. It's kind of just been hit or miss for them because they rely so much on explosive plays. So it's really not that surprising when they have a stretch of offense where they look like really, really good. A lot of times that involves Legette making some big plays down the field, but then it's not been that surprising. Second half against Georgia, Georgia took away the big plays. They kind of bogged down, and really I thought the crowd got to South Carolina. They had false starts.
Sure.
When they get behind the sticks, it's when they're not on schedule, they really struggle to make it up because it goes right back to what we were talking about. Just teams kind of pin their ears back. They know the run is not a threat in those scenarios, and then you're taking an offensive line that already has their struggles and putting them kind of in a bad spot. So I thought the way that the second half of that Georgia game started off, Georgia goes right down the field, they score, and then they back South Carolina up. They had a hold on the ensuing kickoff, and they're starting from the 10. They're on 10. The crowd at that point has started to get into it. Then, we've all seen that 3 and out where you punt it and the other team has the ball at like the 50, and you can just feel all the momentum shift back. So credit to Georgia, though, guys. I mean, they didn't panic at all. They were just like, we're going to keep doing what we do. We're going to win the game. And they went out there and executed.
If you could identify, obviously the offensive line is one of them. If you could identify issues, are any of them solvable and correctable in the bye week? I went back and looked. I think South Carolina is like 14-2 since 2009, coming off a bye, 2-0 under Beamer. Is there anything you can do getting an extra week off to protect someone on the offensive line, add a wrinkle? Is there anything correctable that can make a big impact this week?
Yeah, that's something we're kind of focused on or just looking forward to seeing on Saturday, because they have done this staff. They've kind of started a little bit slow in seasons under Beamer, but they've really played well down the stretch. And it's because for the most part, they go into the bye, they go into the second half of the year, and they kind of start to tweak and tinker a little bit. They've done a pretty good job of figuring out what they do well, while also the other side of that, just scrapping what they don't do well. And so we're curious to see. They have said, hey, there are going to be changes, offense, defense, and special teams. I think there's going to be some depth chart shifts maybe in terms of, hey, this guy's going to play more, this guy's going to play less. But we don't quite know what those changes are going to be yet. So I'm curious to see that. They've kind of, on the offensive line, they kind of already made those moves. There's not really a whole lot else they can do in terms of personnel. Ja'Kai Moore, who's played a lot for them over his career, he was out last week, shoulder injury. He's supposed to be back this week, so they may insert him back in there. But they made the move to the true freshman the Georgia week, and that was just a matter of them saying, look, we got older guys here. They just haven't performed. Let's just go with the freshmen and live with it. And so I think for them, a good part of finding themselves as the year goes on is just those freshmen getting those reps and kind of seeing that light bulb turn on. And one thing they want to do now, I think, is try to just pick 5 guys on the offensive line and just stick with them and try to let them gel together. I think Florida's maybe been doing some shifting around on their O-line as well. I think every school that struggles on the O-line to an extent it's like that catch-22. They're trying to find the right 5, but you really want to just put 5 out there and let them get used to each other and get a bunch of reps together. So they've shuffled, they've moved around, they've moved guys up. They started 2 true freshmen last week or 2 weeks ago against Tennessee. So yeah, I think there will be some changes. I'm not sure yet what all those will be and how meaningful they will be, how impactful they will be.
What were your thoughts before we get into some keys to the game on just how last year's matchup played out and, how South Carolina seemingly kind of just shrugged that off to kind of end their season on a high note. But did you kind of feel like that was an outlier for them and is that, I saw Shane Beamer say this week that's not a motivating factor for him and his team at all.
Yeah, it was honestly probably one of the biggest turnarounds from one week to the next that I have ever seen. And, Beamer likes to pick on the media folks here that none of us picked them to beat Tennessee, after seeing that against Florida. And we're just kind of like, well,
no lie.
Yeah. But it is kind of funny, y'all. So if you look at, and I know 2 years ago, Napier wasn't at Florida yet, but, you look at that.
That game 2 years ago was a big part of the reason why that coach is no longer at Florida and Napier is here, though.
Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. Florida and South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina controlled that game, hammered Florida. Florida repays the favor to them in Gainesville last year. And then for South Carolina against Tennessee, Beamer's first year, Tennessee hammers South Carolina in Knoxville. South Carolina repays the favor in Columbia last year. And then Tennessee repays the favor in Knoxville this year. So they've kind of had that, I know Florida, the big narrative is home versus away. I don't think it's quite to that extent for South Carolina, but they have played better against teams when they've been at Williams-Brice Stadium. So, I think that was part of it. A big change from the Florida game to next week against Tennessee for them last year was they just completely said, we're doing too much on offense. Like they really streamlined. They were doing all these different personnel changes. I mean, early in the year last year, it looked like a hockey line change, like the amount of subbing they were doing from play to play. And they had all these different checks. And they just said, we got to just let Rattler and Juice Wells and those guys play. And it's funny the difference in a game when you're like big play guys are making big plays down the field, and then when they're not. And you go back and look at that Tennessee game, it wasn't a whole lot different in such a weird way as far as what they were doing, but receivers are just making play after play down the field, and it just kind of energized them. So I've told people all year long when we talked about Tennessee last week or 2 weeks ago, I was like, what South Carolina did to Tennessee and Columbia last year will have no bearing in what was going to happen in Knoxville. And I don't really know that what happened in Gainesville last year is going to have much of a bearing this week either.
I just remembered because they just released Anthony Richardson's version of what do they call that on Netflix? The quarterback show.
Oh yeah, the QB1.
QB1. I just remembered Spencer Rattler was on this season before Anthony Richardson. So I was wondering, I was like, hey, does he have like an extra COVID year? Does he come back? Does he have some sort of 7th or 8th year of eligibility to come back? He's been there for a while. How has he played? Obviously, there's like an icy hot NIL deal, some sort of physical therapy NIL deal local to Columbia that he can get. How has he handled being a leader? And obviously there's been glaring issues with the offensive line handling that. And then how has he played despite that?
Yeah, man. I mean, people around here have been very impressed with Spencer, just kind of growing into that leadership role. Even before this season, like if you go back to last year, like an entire year prior when he got here, we would hear things about, the physical tools, like he throws the ball for a guy who's not really that big with incredible velocity, quick release, different arm angles, a little bit quicker than people give him credit for too. He can escape the pocket. This year, it's really been more about, hey, he's become the leader of this team. He is, his understanding of the offense is at a completely different level than it was when he was kind of just feeling his way into the thing last year. And even frankly, last year, it was kind of like, all right, I'm going to go do 1 year in the SEC, then I'm going to go to the league. And it was kind of just like, it was going to be a 1 year thing. He's kind of, I think, ingrained himself a little bit more into the community. People see him as like, hey, that's a South Carolina player now, not that's a Oklahoma transfer. And so I think it's been good for everybody over there. And, Tennessee, he didn't have his best game, but man, when I say they were like in his grill almost every play, like it was really tough, I think, for anybody to get anything done. If you were playing quarterback, you go back and look at the North Carolina game, he got sacked 9 times and completed 30 of 39 passes for, I don't remember the passing yardage, but it was a huge number. It was just getting hit and was just firing the ball, putting it where it needed to be, giving his guys a chance. Georgia did a really good job against him in the second half after he had a really good, first half. So that's really been it. When he has had time, he has like increased his, I would say, his accuracy, his consistency, just knowing where the ball is supposed to go. He's increased it tenfold since last year. But like any quarterback, you start hitting him and getting in his face and just consistently kind of, I feel like pressure builds. Like you can almost feel when that quarterback starts to see pressure, even when it's not there as the game goes on. And I think that's what Tennessee did a phenomenal job of against him. So, but yeah, he's clearly made a step forward in his game. And I think from what we hear, Leggett has made the biggest jump as far as NFL draft boards. But you have started to hear that Rattler has started to kind of climb those boards again, is going to have a chance to be drafted, at some point in the first 4 rounds or so.
And to your question, Nick, he does have another year of eligibility left, but it sounds like he
does. But I think this will be it
for sure. As we wrap up with Wes Mitchell from GamecockCentral.com, Wes, in your mind, what are some keys to the game on Saturday? How does South Carolina win this game, and how does South Carolina lose this game?
Yeah, good question, man.
Actually, that was my question, but Chris asked the same thing. Shout out to Chris.
Bro, yeah, Chris was your ghostwriter.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you guys, and I'll tell you, Chris. I mean, the like obvious one is just the boring answer is, hey, if Florida runs the ball really well, then they're probably going to have a good chance to win. If South Carolina can run the ball their big thing is like, can they just get a little bit out of the running game? And then that's when they let Spencer Rattler go to work.
Just that's like a pulse.
Yes, Joe, just enough. And Mario Anderson has kind of taken over at their running back position, number 24, throwback, old school kid. Really like watching him run. So, their offense though kind of bases around, hey, can we get 7? Can we get Rattler in a position to just go win the game? And so for them, I think that's always going to be big. And when you start talking about Florida and them on the road, South Carolina at home, I know it's a cliche, but whoever starts fast in this game, I feel like we may know in the first 7-8 minutes what way this game is going, because South Carolina at home, when they really get going and they get that crowd behind them, it really has snowballed on opponents. And then
you're speaking to Nick right now, Wes. I think he's teetering on his pick. So
I mean,
I'm back and forth on my pick.
That's honestly, man. And so here's the thing: if this game was in Gainesville, I would be picking Florida. In Columbia, I'm picking South Carolina. I don't think it is that simple, but in some ways it might be that simple. And you go to the other side of the ball. South Carolina's run defense has not been that impressive statistically, but when you look at some of the offenses they've faced, compared to like everybody else you're kind of comparing them to, they, to the eye test, look like a team that's improved against the run. I mean, Florida ran all over them last year. I was looking back at those stats. I mean, there were 3 different guys that had, like, I don't know if they were career days, but 3 really good games.
It was literally Montrell Johnson's best game of his career and it was the first 100-yard game for ETN. I mean, they both went over 100.
Okay, so literally at the time were like career days, and then Anthony Richardson rushed for 90-something, 80-something yards. Like
Yeah.
it was so avoid that. Like I feel like if Florida rushes for 130 yards, like they're gonna get their yards. I feel like, but you got to just avoid the career days if you're South Carolina, and they've got a new D-line coach this year. They've been a little bit better. Just those interior guys have. It just hasn't quite shown up yet in the stat sheet. So I think that'll be something to keep an eye on as well.
Is the game sold out this week?
It is. So this is actually, weirdly enough, South Carolina's homecoming.
Oh, good.
And this is so the South Carolina State Fair. For those, I mean, the fans on here probably have been to Columbia at some point for a game, maybe. The fairgrounds are right outside the stadium. So this is Fair Week as well, which means there will be an absolute bleeping circus around the stadium on Saturday.
It's a fair.
So it'll be packed.
And it's true. I remember the first time, it must have been 2013, my first time to Williams-Brice, and I thought, man, it's not on campus. Kind of looks like a spaceship. Like, this is weird. But like that, like you said, when that place gets going and Sandstorm starts rolling, and it is a really, really good venue, and Billy Napier said, that crowd of 51,000 at Utah was really, really effective against their team. I'm thinking, way more people at Williams-Brice. Maybe you should just cancel the game at Death Valley in November. So this will be the biggest environment Florida plays in, and certainly if people are going to be drunk and having fair funnel cakes, then it sounds like it'll be a hostile environment.
Yeah, it'll be a fun day. It'll be a great atmosphere. On a personal note, seriously, guys, leave for the stadium early. Like, the traffic for this game will, and your Florida fans too. If you're going down there, whatever time you think you need to get out there tailgating, subtract an hour and a half and get out there at least that early. Like, there's gonna be traffic everywhere. Parking, it gets bogged down. The one advantage they've always had to being like off campus is that the traffic isn't quite as bad as some places for most games, but for fair, I mean, all bets are off.
Nick, we can't be too crazy on Friday night.
Yeah, I think it was the fair 2 years ago, maybe, because my girlfriend at the time, now wife, I literally just got out of the car. I was like, hey, I'm going to walk to the stadium. I've got my stuff. Just like turn around, go do whatever you were going to do. But yeah, it was packed. We were just parked on the street.
Yeah, more of the same.
Well, Wes, we really appreciate the time. Definitely looking forward to getting back up to Columbia. I haven't been there since 2017. So,
okay. I guess it obviously won't be dark when the game starts. Should be getting dark towards the end. I know lots of schools are doing the light show thing now, but that would be the one new thing since you've been there is they've got the LED lights and they sync it all up. It's pretty cool. I know a lot of teams are doing it, but it's once it starts getting dark, that'll be something else that's kind of new there. So
I'll be on the field looking at it. So seeing what this matchup has in store on Saturday, and we definitely appreciate you coming on, Wes, to give us some perspective on the Gamecocks. Let people know where they can follow you and read your work.
Yeah, please come check us out, GamecockCentral.com. I'm on Twitter, Wes Mitchell GC, at Gamecock Central as well. And then the great thing about an On3 subscription is you can come read all of our stuff as well. So would love any of the Florida fans who want to get the South Carolina perspective to come on over to Gamecock Central. And yeah, guys, appreciate y'all having me on. I've been reading y'all stuff as well, keeping up with the Florida side. So appreciate that as always too.
Good stuff, Wes. Well, we always good catching up with you, man, and we'll see you on Saturday, bud.
All right, man. Y'all have a good one. Be safe getting here, all right?
Thanks, for sure, Wes. Man. For sure. Wes Mitchell from GamecockCentral.com giving us some perspective on Shane Beamer's team and if the Gators can go back up there and avenge a 2021 loss, although they won't be thinking about that loss. They'll be thinking about the other road losses that they've had. 5 straight away from the swamp, Nick.
5 straight, starting with Vanderbilt, right?
Starting with
Or
Vanderbilt.
no,
Yes.
one before that. Okay.
No. South Carolina,
yeah,
then Vanderbilt.
yeah. I'm starting to. Man, I forgot how old Spencer Rattler was. And he has
Yeah.
another year of eligibility.
Still got one
That's
more
wild.
year.
That's wild. I was trying to figure out. So he just turned 23. Like Graham Mertz will turn 23. We got some.
It's a loaded quarterback draft class, Nick. Maybe he might another year in the SEC. Who knows?
Not getting sacked 22 times in 5 games. Not like that.
That's right. Well, you heard the keys from Wes. We are going to give you ours for this game and also take some more questions from the comment section. Before we do that, want to give a shout out to Prairie Dental Center. The doctor is a UF grad who's practiced in Gainesville for 3 decades and has developed a deep understanding of how to diagnose and treat various dental problems, along with advanced skills and knowledge to provide more effective and efficient care to his patients. If you're having dental concerns or just need a cleaning, Prairie Dental Center offers a wide range of personalized care options to meet your individual needs. Give their office a call at 352-373-3431. Tell them Gators Online sent you, and your new patient exam will be free. And we are headed to South Carolina tomorrow, Nick, to see what changes, if any, have been made. And we're not altering our travel schedule. I guess maybe we are a little bit, but they have. I guess you can't keep doing the same thing over and over. Although,
You can.
yeah, we can't, that'd be insanity. Now their travel schedule for the trip to Utah was kind of thrown off. So, but they're doing something different now. Obviously, and I looked it up. Billy's teams won on the road at Louisiana. This was not an issue that they had, but again, playing on the road in the SEC is a different animal, and I think playing in Williams-Brice Stadium is going to be a different animal than what Florida saw at Utah and Florida saw at Kentucky. And for me, Nick, that's got to be one of the keys to the game. Like, Florida committed 9 penalties at Utah, 10 at Kentucky. The offensive line was responsible for a lot of them. No Kingsley again, which at this point, but it's not even much of a storyline because he's been out so much. But it is the second career road start for Jake Slaughter. How does he do now with another opportunity, having gotten that first game under his belt and some of the, the learning things that he had to go through? You got Austin Barber back at left tackle. You've got some more depth at the tackle position as well. Can that offensive line have a better performance, avoid procedural penalties, handle the crowd noise? Definitely something I think we're all going to be watching, Nick.
Yeah, and something I hadn't even brought up, hadn't written it or even said it this week, was that, I've said all along, like, Florida's still a team and a program learning how to win. And I think you saw that, even Billy, you saw that against Tennessee. There were opportunities to step on Tennessee's neck and finish that game in the third quarter. And you don't do it. You kind of just, put it in cruise control and roll down the hill into the garage. Part of that learning how to win is learning how to take your operation on the road and learn how to handle yourself and make it a business trip. Florida hasn't done that. They've started slow. Said over and over and over again, this is not an offense that is built to come back from down 14, 17 points. They're not going to score quickly. They're not going to run plays quickly. So they're definitely not going to score quickly. So the key for me is start fast. That place will get loud and you will have procedural penalties if you go out there and South Carolina starts 14-0 in the first quarter. So I need to see Florida start the game fast, get a touchdown or get points on your first drive. And then the other one I want to see, treat this, if you can, defensively like you did against Tennessee. I think if Florida can get home with 4, now you're making a lot tighter windows and tougher passes for Spencer Rattler. He's been very good. He's been accurate. But if you can get pressure with 4 and not have to commit more guys to the box, then I think Florida, that's a recipe for Florida's defense to maybe finally, hopefully, fingers crossed, get a turnover.
They got one last week.
-4 on the year.
Shout out to TJ Cersei. And shout out to Tyreek Sapp, man. They could have had 2 more.
STA Pride.
That is right. Well, we heard from Wes say, if Florida can run the ball, that was going to be a key to this game, and that most teams, that they can run on South Carolina, that usually is a recipe for disaster for them. And as bad as South Carolina has been at defending the run, they've been even worse at defending the pass. They are dead last in the SEC, 128th nationally. They are giving up 301 yards per game. Graham Mertz has not had a 300-yard performance since the season opener at Utah. He has been the second most accurate quarterback in the country, one of only 2 that has completed 80% of his passes. But as Steve Spurrier has noted, as Allie Napier, Billy's wife, has noted, they are not throwing the ball deep enough. And she's clearly
it's not just deep. Like 66% of his completions are traveling
behind the line of scrimmage or less than 10 yards for sure.
I mean, like 34% of his completions are coming, from
behind the line of scrimmage.
Just from me to the computer, just throwing the ball to Trey Wilson, and somehow that's a 15-yard completion. That's a run. Trey Wilson is being robbed of like 400 rushing yards this year.
I tell you what, though, she clearly, Nick, is, she married a quarterback, so she wants to see a potent passing attack. Like last year, 3 games in, she's saying something to Billy about the passing game. And then Anthony Richardson went off in Tennessee, so maybe his wife needs to say more things to him, because apparently in the last week or so, she mentioned Spurrier's comments to him, as he pointed out to Nick. So, but look, I think that's key, right? This is a defense, a passing defense that you should be able to do it against. Billy says that they've called them. He says that they've had plays where guys have been vertical and they've been covered. He didn't have quite the exchange that James Franklin had in the press conference this week over deep balls, but he did acknowledge that would absolutely help this offense open things up for the run game. And if they could hit it early, that would certainly help their confidence. So, Nick, let's see if they can exploit this pass defense. Let's see if Graham can go over 300 yards. I don't think that's as key maybe as it is him to connect on some long balls.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was Graham Mertz last week was the first time him and his football team won a game in which he threw 30 passes dating back to Wisconsin.
Wow.
So I don't know that Florida needs to hit downfield passes. I think you can just on paper, and I know like Wes said, like, hey, like they're better in some areas than the stats, but like on paper, a loss this week not only makes like the road thing still a thing, but like this looks like a really bad South Carolina team. At least on paper, like you just said, they're 128th. Like what? There's 130.
They're averaging
129 teams.
101 yards allowed per game throwing the ball.
So it seems like an opportunity to get that monkey off your back. And like it looks, as we sit here on Thursday, it looks like a very winnable game, despite what Vegas says. And listen, the men and women don't build palaces out in the desert for being wrong. South Carolina is favored in this game.
What's it at now? 2.5 still, or is it dropped to 2?
It's dropped to 2. Somebody's coming in on.
It's
on
dropping.
Gators. Yeah. But yeah. So to me, it's if Florida comes out and looks the way they did against Tennessee, I'll feel way better about them going, to Baton Rouge, to Columbia, Missouri, hosting Arkansas, and even feel better, on November 25th against Florida State. If they go out and they look like they have the first 2 weeks, then you're looking at the schedule and you're like, okay, where are the 2 wins to get to bowl eligibility?
Yeah, no, this is a critical juncture in their season to kind of determine what type of second half of the schedule they're going to have. And I think, to me, Nick, the final key is, this defense bounced back from its worst performance of the season against Kentucky and really gave up hardly anything outside of a play where there was an egregious face mask that wasn't called on Jason Marshall. And then another play where they hit a 52-yard pass on a true freshman who then came back and forced 2 incompletions and a turnover on downs on the same drive. I mean, literally outside of those 2 plays, Vandy got like nothing against Florida's defense. And now, again, they're not a juggernaut offensively, but Florida played well. They tackled about it. I mean, they're at about 6 to 7 missed tackles per game. That's the number that they've been at in most. And obviously, Kentucky was the worst tackling performance that they've had in about a decade plus. So I think, to me, defense travels. We're halfway through the season. The numbers show that this is a very, very talented unit. They're still going to get some tougher tests moving forward, even tougher than Spencer Rattler in this offense. But nonetheless, let's see what you can go and do on the road now. I mean, they still went out there and lost that first game at Utah. And even though they played really well in the second half and stretches of that game, they still gave up that play on the opening snap. And then obviously the way that they played at Kentucky was awful. So I think it's important for this unit to go out on the road and feel like they contributed to a win and played well away from the swamp. So that I think that's big for them too. And get a turnover, like you said, Nick.
Just one.
Well, they got one. Just keep them going.
It's a -4 turnover margin on the year. It's not good.
If anything, I think they need to get more sacks than turnovers.
I mean, they're getting pressures. They're getting pressures. They're getting hurries. They're just not finishing.
Princely Uman-Mielen had 6 quarterback hurries in the last game. It just couldn't get home.
Yeah. Real quick before we get out of here, I'll answer a couple of these questions that I see here from Chris, my guy. Chris, not used to this negativity from you, man. Already calling a loss up there on the road. Not used to this negativity from you. I think they were embarrassed. Now, does that carry into the rest of the season, or was that just like, hey, we're embarrassed and we're gonna make it right? And now we've made it right against Vanderbilt, and now we're on to the next thing. So yeah, I think it did change the attitude of the players. Certainly last week. Does that carry into the coming weeks? And then missed it. And then this one, 100%. And I didn't think that a freshman would make this kind of an impact, but like those orbit motions, those jet sweeps, like teams were just not respecting him when Ricky was running them, and they ran them far fewer. And that not only is could be a dangerous play if you give the ball to Trey, but then it's also you can set up a screen to a running back off of that. You're having a guy chase, and now it opens up running lanes for the running back. So, having Eugene Wilson available is massive.
I wrote in my sideline takeaways from the Vanderbilt game, there is a direct correlation between Florida scoring 22 points against Charlotte and 14 points at Kentucky, and Eugene Wilson being out of the starting lineup for both of those games. He is that much of an impact for sure. And status of Andy Jean. Patrick asked, he's he's out. So that he was a guy that was looking to get more of an opportunity with Caleb Douglas being out. Now he's out as well. So they really need Khalil Jackson to kind of step up and be that guy.
2 years ago, Marcus Burke had 2 catches for 73 yards. Do we get a Andy or do we get a Mizell game? Oh, let's call him Andy. Do we get an Aiden Mizell game with
or does Burke show up again?
A nice long catch. I'm not going to put my chips in the Marcus Burke basket for this week. But we'll see. And Chris, if Florida loses this week, it's probably your fault. You're done going to games, my guy. Done going to games.
Listen, this is going to be it's gonna be an important weekend for the Gators. So we'll definitely see how it all unfolds.
Just
Make
one
sure-
game. Hold on, real quick. Just one game. He's only played in one, and you can play in 4 and a bowl game. The bowl game no longer counts as your 4, so you can technically play in 5.
So that's important note. And again, Nick wrote that in his depth chart takeaways. This could be an opportunity for Aiden Mizell in this game. And if you're gonna take a deep shot, he might be your guy. Throw him out on a go route and see what you can do. So we'll see what Florida does. Obviously, you guys make sure that you stay locked with GatorsOnline.com, not only for our coverage from the team side, but some really great recruiting coverage coming from Corey and Keith in the coming days. So make sure that you guys are subscribed. If you're not, you can get in the door for just $1. And of course, make sure that you're liked and subscribed on this channel as well, as we bring you guys some videos from Columbia, including Gator Walk outside of Williams-Brice Stadium. Final ad read before we jump out of here. I want to encourage all Florida fans to go to rogueshop.com if you have issues sleeping, chronic pain, and or anxiety and stress. Rogue Shop sells CBD, THC, smokables, edibles, and vapes, as well as handcrafted bath salts, soaps, candles, and more. Rogue Shop is a true small business. They have 5 employees and make all of their products with their own cannabis grown in their manufacturing facility. Visit rogueshop.com. That's ROGUESHOP.com. That will do it for this week's episode. Appreciate Wes Mitchell from Gamecock Central for joining us. And we will see you guys next time live from Columbia after the game. So make sure that you guys are tuned in. We did our rapid reaction last week live, just like we did this. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. All the folks in the comments section. Shout out to our Stadium and Gale brethren for tuning in as well. We were not able to read most of their comments that they left, but that's all right. And we will see you guys next week to recap Florida, South Carolina. That's right. That is right. That is right, John. For Nick Del Torre, I'm Zach Albaverdi. We will see you guys after this week.